Good morning, everybody. It's great to be in the house of the Lord. So today we are doing Romans chapter 6. All right, and we are doing verse 15 to 23. All right. So our title today is "What is a slave of righteousness?" Or it can be freedom of sin, freedom to sin. All right. So as we continue on Romans 6, chapter 6, verses 15 to 23. This in the middle of chapter 6. Last week, what we did is the first half of Romans 6, as we know. We did it, verses 1 to 14. And we had dealing with Paul's argument that God has not only saved us from the penalty of sin, but He also saved us from the power of sin. There are a lot of Christians who don't connect the dots on those two things. All right, those things earlier I mentioned. All right, and there they will say, well, that thank God, that we are saved from the penalty of their sin. But when it comes to understanding, all right, that the power of sin that has been broken over their life, that the power of sin has broken over their life, they don't understand that part, all right? And there's a kind of whole new avenue of thoughts, and that's what Paul has been talking about, all right? Here it is this chapter, in fact, it is what he's been talking about for a while, all right? And this whole Romans, the book of Romans, the first several chapters as we have gone through, all right, all about our salvation. And Paul is explaining all about how we are saved, and those are such important things for us to see here, and that we that we saw last week for those of you who are not here. All right, if you weren't here, but as far sorry for those sermons that's supposed to be put on Facebook and YouTube. We try our best, all right, to put it as quick as possible so that you can hear it back, all right? And you look at me, and so let's look at what we talked about last week in Romans chapter 6 verses 14. All right, Romans chapter 6 verse 14. For sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under law, but under grace. All right. The reason that Paul make that statement, all right, because the law can do nothing. The law does not give us the power over sin. All right. That means if the law we have no power over sin, we cannot do nothing. All right, and can do nothing to give us. The law can't do nothing. And we say that, and I say that many times already. All right, the law will show you where you are and relationship to sin. All right, as you know, the law show you this is wrong. This is wrong. All right, and righteousness, but it can do nothing to actually improve your life. And so what happened? Thing is that God grace, so that what Paul said, you are no longer under the law, but you are under what? Under grace. You know that not everybody actually understand grace. Not every Christian who understand that grace that God has given to us. All right, okay. And then the Jews, the Jews that living in Paul's days, all right, they didn't understand grace. there's a lot of people, even today, there's a lot of people who don't even understand grace at all. Alright? And we don't understand grace. Years ago, as you know, Carrie Chapel, we know that Pastor Chuck wrote a book called Why Grace Changed Everything. Alright? It's a great book. Alright? And if you ever read it, you can probably attach to that. Alright? It's what Pastor Chuck Smith talks about. Alright? Pastor Chuck, he just goes through and does a public study on grace on that book. But he also tells us a lot of interesting story in that book, and about his own background and life, and early years of his Christianity, early years of his knowing Jesus. All right, then he was really trying to kind of live that Christian life on his own. All right, and I get that. All right, for those from people from time to time, they like, well, Pastor Alan, you don't understand me. I'm just really, trying to live for God. Many of us try to live for God. All right, and that's a tough one, because they are. What they often communicate to me is that there is a work of their. All right, Patrick, can you on the big icon? I think it's hot. Sure. All right. They try to live on their own to be a good Christian. All right, a tough one, and on their own strength, and try to live that Christianity life. I think many of you have been through that. Try to live your way of that Christian life. All right, and we can't live that Christian life. If you try and you realize that it's not easy to live that life. All right, and the Christian life outside of our ability, apart from God, and that's what we need to do, is to recognize that it is God's grace that enable us to live that Christian life. It is God's grace that make you to live that Christian life. It is not your own effort, your own works. All right, it is God's grace that brings us above a work of holiness and the sanctification. All right, it is in our life. It is God's grace that empower us to say what? No to sin. And that is what Paul has been saying in his first half of Romans chapter 6. Alright? It's only by God's grace that you are going to be able to say what? No to sin and yes to God. So, but like I said, that the Jews didn't understand that, and they was really messed with Paul, and he walked, and as he would teach those people, as Paul was teaching, set those people and call those people are the Judaizers, and they will come around after Paul had been another particular place. All right, I have told you many times, when Paul was teaching the grace of God, and when Paul left, and these people will come and they will mess up all the teaching of Paul. All right, and they will stir up the kind of trouble, and they will say, that Apostle Paul say, that he is telling you, that he is talking about the grace of God, those Judaizers, and the stuff like that, and he will be telling you, you are not under the law. These people come, Paul teach you something, and then they say, you are no more under the law. That's what Paul is saying, and didn't he say that to me? And you are not under the law, but under grace. Yes, yeah. But what did he told us? All right, it's ridiculous. What Paul says is ridiculous. Then they say that only things you do when you get out from under the law, all right, is you end up with lawless people. As I say, you know, if you don't have law, they will say you will have lawless people. If you're not under the law, that you all do, that you got to be under the law. So if they will say that the law gives us guidelines. All right, the law gives us rule. The law serves as safety. You are got to be under the law. That's what the Judaism come and say. All right, it's ridiculous to say you are not under the law. The law, that actually what Paul is saying. Paul said you are not under the law. Yeah, you're under grace. And they say that how can that be? Sorry, can you give me a hot one? Okay, he said that because they didn't understand grace. They didn't understand the power of grace. And wait a little bit, because those Jews, they don't understand, all right? And they don't understand the power of grace. They didn't understand the ability of grace to change our life, all right? And there's a lot of people, and I'm telling you this in this room or within the sound of my voice, all right? And those who are watching online, all right? They just don't understand that the same grace is changed to change life. Paul wants to talk more about, all right? There's a little bit. So this chapter has been given an argument explaining why true believers, when they are under grace, just going to give into a life of sin. All right, and you remember that he argued last week because the reason he's not going to give into life of sin is because we are being baptized. As I talked about, we are baptized into Christ. All right, as we talked about last week, that we are immersed into Christ. All right, and in Him we join in Him in those benefits of His death. Remember, and because we share His death, and remember, because we share His death, and we are being what? We have been set free. All right? And the tyrant of our sin, because we are dead to sin. And used to be, we were dead, all right? And we were used to be dead in our sin before that as a non-believer. All right? We were dead in our sin. And because sin doesn't, and now because you are dead to yourself, because because it doesn't control a dead man. All right, as I said last week. Well, so not only that, but we came back to life again. All right, but we came to a new life. Is that right? Okay, and we are resurrected into a new life. I know it's kind of very difficulty, stuff to kind of hang on to it, and the reason is difficult because Christians recognize that once I came to Jesus, I don't stop sinning. Some people have this idea, when I become Christian, I will stop sinning. All right, and here you are, as Pastor Alan, telling me that sin has been loosed from my life, and then the power of sin is no longer in control of my life, and then why do I still sin? Why do I still do the things that that's not pleasing to God, and the power of sin is no longer in control of my life, and that's a big kind of fairy tale with a lot of Christians that keep on messing with that. But here's the point. All right. You know, the reason that you and what do you call it, to sin as a believer, right? It is because we chose. I use the word chose to. Because we chose to sin. All right. When you are become a Christian, you have a choice whether you chose to sin or not. All right. I know that probability doesn't maybe make you feel, all right, very happy. All right. The word I use. All right. Had that fact, that method used to be a slavery to sin. Before that, you were a slavery to sin. All right. And what means is that you have no choice. You have no choice. All right. Before you just sin because you will want a slave, and that what slave do is, what do the slave do? Is to sin. All right. They will do, and then they don't have any choice in the matter. And the Bible tells us that the whole world is under the control of the evil one. John writes in his first epistle, all right, and so sin was just, it is just like breathing, you know, it's like your breathing is normal, you know, when you sin, all right, and that when we came to Christ, all right, life and we accept Him as our Savior, and we enter into His death, and then through the death we die to sin. We die to the power of sin to control our life. All right. Now suddenly we didn't have that freedom before. Before that, we don't have that freedom. No. And then, but now we do. We can say no. We can say no. I'm not going to do that. That temptation. Once it comes our way, you say, "Here, do this." All right. And so we do it. And no, but we can do that. Now you are free to do also that, but you are also free to do. You know, now you have the freedom either to sin or not to sin. Before that, you have no choice. All right. Hope you understand. All right. You are not free to sin. But you are not really free. Right. You feel that, oh, I still sin, but you have choice. You know. So why do I keep sinning? Because I'm free to sin, and I want it to do. I can choose to, and that's why we do it. So I have to kind of relearn what that freedom is all about that God has given me. You know, God has given you that freedom to choose to sin or not to sin. All right, you have to learn. I have to say no to that sinful nature, and to say what? Yes to God. And that's what Paul is going and what he's dealing with, you know. And he's always continue this thing. He begins with another question in verse 15. All right, verse 15. Can you read it? Just give me a break.
Yes.
Okay, you can read from here.
You said 15?
Yeah, like Romans 6.
What then? Shall we sin because we are not under the law but under grace? By no means.
All right, and the Jews will answer the question, you know, it kind of it's well, of course, that all those left is that you tell people you are under the regimen and the construction of the law, that what they're going to do but sin. And Paul said no, it is, and he answered his own question. As Paul answered his own question, he said that this is well, and emphasized in the Greek. All right, it is like by no means. God forbid, absolutely not. We are going to do that, and that's all right. Let's look at verse 16. And it says, all right, do you not know that if you present yourself to anyone as obedient slave. You are slave of the one who you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or obedience, which leads to righteousness. Okay, this is the stuff we are supposed to know. All right, and do you know that if you present yourself, this is a powerful kind of argument to why we who are living under grace no longer desire to give in to that flesh, and the life of sin, and because we know and we understand the principle of whatever we give ourselves to, we are a slave of that thing. You know, if you give yourself to that thing, you are a slave to that thing. All right, we understand it is in fact the matter of we give in to that thing, and we become a slave to that thing. And it's just a law, it's a spiritual principle. All right, and we understand we can either be slave to sin, or we can be slave to righteousness. All right, and now again, before you knew Jesus, you didn't have that choice. I say you were a slave to sin, and that was no optional except to come to Christ. One, He set you free, all right, but now you come to Jesus, all right, from that slavery, to sin, all right. Now, what are enslaved to? How do you enter? What is slavery looks like? All right. Maybe you could ask a question. What is slavery looks like? All right. Let me see. Yeah, it's probably a good question. What does a slavery look like in your eyes, in your thinking? And except maybe some of you have watched, movies from Hollywood. What the slavery looks like. Or maybe some of you have watched like Roots. I don't think many of you know. It's a very old series, Roots. All right, how slavery is. All right, okay.
I've watched it live.
Because you say, and how much right do they have, or as a slavery, and what does a slavery slave to know is we understand. It's not we understand what a slavery is. All right, and look what he said again with me in verse 16. He said, "Do you not know what you?" And this is a very important. It's present yourself to anyone as an obedient or as a slave. You are a slave. In this word it says obedience. Look. So this is one of when you obey something, all right. There's one when you obey, and that's who you are slave to. When you obey, you are slave to who? All right, and then to the one you obey, right? We have all kinds of passion in our life, and thought, and desire, and the things that comes into our life, okay? And that you are slave to that one, correct? All right? And we all have all kinds of passion, all right? Or things that impress themselves upon us. And some of those, are quite ungodly. The things that some are ungodly, all right? And quite worldly. When we obey them, we follow our desire. We show them that we are slave to that thing. All right. So the question is, who or what are you obeying with? And every one of us, would I like to be able to say we clearly, even those are here today. All right. Whether are we obeying God? All right. The fact matter is sometimes we realize that not the case, you know, whether you are being of God or not, you know, and to understand another biblical principle. There is another Bible principle that one that Jesus gave us, you know. All right, so sorry, in Matthew chapter 6 verses 25. All right, I just take one part. No one can serve two masters, and there is a ... there. All right, that is a biblical principle that applies. And by the way, you might notice, you know, well, the way that I put it there, ... All right, and in that verse, it's not full Bible verse that I give you, because the context which I spoke was talking about God and money. In that context, it actually talks about God and money. All right, and he basically say you cannot serve two masters, God or money. In that context, you love one and you must hate the other. And you might say, well, Pastor Alan, you know, isn't that kind of wrong of you, you know, to use the word out of context? All right, never have Christian kind of break down your neck because you use a word and out of context. You know, in this context, it's not about God and money. All right, to you kind that there's nothing. As for me, I think there's nothing wrong. All right, with in this verse out of context, when the context is universe, when the context talks about it's a universe, and then you do need to understand that context in universe. All right, universal. All right, but where it says something like or something about God, you know, particular. If you knew the Bible, when the Bible, when God said God is love, all right. Well, guess what? I don't care what context you put that, it's always going to be true. God is love. No matter what, God is always there, and never a point where God is not going to be love. All right, He's always a God of love. Okay, and so when He says that you can't serve two masters, you're always only to be able to say to serve one master. It's biblical principle. I think it's too cold or what?
No, it's just the screen.
Oh, okay. What? Sorry.
Are we rolling back?
Okay, talk about in this context about God and money, and also can say God and sex, all right, and God and drugs, you know, God and power, all right, God and the pleasure, whatever it is, it may be, whatever that particular poison may be that talks about sex, whether God or sex, you know, okay, but just to keep you in mind. So some remember that we learned in the first of this chapter 6, you know, and be able to talk a lot about slave to sin. We are always, you know, kind of slave to sin. But I want you to remember that sometimes, guys, you know, for all of us in Christ today, all of us who are believers in Christ today, we have been baptized into Jesus, meaning of what we saw last week. All right, and because of that, we have been been set free from slavery to sin. We have been set free. Literally, I want you to look at verse 17. All right, this is how Paul said. All right, verse 17. But thanks to be to God that you who were once slave of sin had become obedient from the heart to the standard of teaching to which you were committed. All right. So you see here, to the believer, this freedom of sin has been activated. All right. It is done deal. It's done deal when you came to Jesus. There is a freedom that comes, all right, into play, whereby set free, where you are set free, so that you remember that, all right, not from the ability to sin, but from the tyrant of sin. Do you understand the difference? All right. So hope you understand. Okay. I am not saying when you come to Jesus, you are going to stop sinning. I'm saying that when you come to Jesus, the power of sin to control that life has been ended, and then now from this point, all right, on, you chose whether you chose to sin because you want, or because you are addicted to it. All right, and we get that addiction to things that has been addicted, but because you have this addiction maybe from the past and everything, is still doing the same thing. All right, even when you become a Christian, but you can choose not whether to sin or not to sin. You know, on the addiction is nothing more than a deep rut into your life. You know, it's kind of whole life that you've been living. All right, you can go down here by, well, you know, kind of in other places we let sin develop this deep rut of sin. Okay, that become a very difficulty. All right, and it's not because you haven't been set free. All right, to know life is a difficult life. That's a deep rut, you know. But so now we are told that you can be a slave to God. You know, now you can be slave to God. Before that, you were slave to sin. All right, that's what the Bible says. Instead of being a slave to sin, you have been set free from sin, and now you are free to be a slave of God. All right, according to the title today. All right, He does that and make you feel. When I say that, when I say that you can be a slave of God. All right, to slave of righteousness. Sometimes that doesn't make people feel all that great. You know, be a slave of God. Don't feel great, okay? Because the word slave, all right, or slavery still come a very negative sort of a connotation. Whatever they hear the word slave, you know, when you hear the word slave to God, slave to righteousness, you know, it kind of mind into our mind, you know, slavery, you know, and maybe given that just the kind of thing, you know. But what interesting about being a slave of God is that you only slave you will even be involved in that will produce freedom in your life. When you're slavery to God, you have the freedom of life. You know, it's different, all right. And slavery, like a change statement, doesn't it? But you know, slavery to God produces freedom, because it is only free from being under. That we are free, okay? The only true free is being in the universe. The only true freedom that we have, and we give our life to Him. When we give our life to Jesus, to be slave of Him, to bring forth that some freedom into our life. You free and Him when the Bible says when you have the Son to set you free. All right, okay. Ourselves. Sometimes maybe you're saying of killing ourselves. You know, we think that free to do is to do. You know, and nobody's going to let you do what I do. All right. Sometimes somebody going to tell you what to do. You know, somebody will tell you what to do. Something is going to rule your life. If you come to Jesus, you are set free from that now. That's how I look that. Alright? Okay? Paul start talking about that. It's going to say it is called walking out of your freedom. It's learning to live a free person. That's how he wrote a whole life of slavery. Alright?